Hi, welcome to the garage. I'm David Schoneman. Have you ever wondered about taking a pile of rusty, old, vintage motorcycle parts like this and making them into something like this? We're going to show you how. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back to the garage. We're building our vintage BMW 1000cc motorcycle out of a pile of old rusty parts that we found here in the shop. Got boxes and boxes of parts from various vintages, and we're going to put together a motorcycle. Hope you're enjoying the program so far. If you are, make sure to remember to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of the episodes. In previous episodes, we took a look at the drivetrain to see what kind of parts we have or what we might need. Last episode, we took a look at the frame and the frame components to determine what parts we still need to order. And I've been ordering parts, sourcing parts online. Some have come in, a lot more have yet to come in, and we'll be talking about those in a future episode. Last time, we also touched on style, and style of the motorcycle is important. What do we want this thing to look like? And I've been thinking a lot about color. Color is an important element of style, of course. So I think that we're going to have to sandblast the frame and repaint the frame. It's not in very good shape. I'm thinking about leaving this as raw steel. We talked about that last time, I think, briefly. The exhaust, I think, will be raw steel. The motor and the transmission, the drivetrain components are going to be raw aluminum. I said I like metal. I think there's a certain aesthetic appeal to the appearance of metal, whether it's steel or aluminum. They both can be gray, but they're a little different shade of gray, and I think they look good. So we still need some element of color. And I may have spoken last time about what color I'm thinking about. I was thinking about a red. And I've been going through some paint chip books. My painter friend has brought over some paint chip books, and I've been earmarking these things and folding corners and whatnot and choosing colors. And where this bike is going to be a lot of silver, dull silver, the frame and the engine, I want to get a bright splash of color here on the tank. Now the tank is large. Like I said last time, we may actually two-tone the tank so that we don't have a huge piece of bright color, but maybe a two-tone. Anyway, I selected a red that I want to take a look at today. We're going to open up the scan. It was dropped off to me this morning. This is from a 2009 Porsche, and it's called Guards Red. Very bright color. We'll take a look here and see what we got. This is just a sample. Actually, this is all the paint we need. It's not a very large tank in terms of painting. It is large in terms of the aesthetics of the bike. There you can see a sense of that. That's very, very bright red. Definitely brighter than the tank. And if you imagine it next to some raw steel, you're going to see that's going to really showcase the bike. On the other BMWs I showed you, thinking about the red one, the more of a brick red color, the 1971 I showed you in an earlier episode, and the green one, the 1975 BMW. Those were a little more subdued colors, a little more subtle. This is, in this case, I don't want to go subtle. I want to go with a bright, bright color. So we're looking at doing this red. Just going to put a little bit on this scrap of paper. We'll hold it up to the tank. Now the red, when it's wet like this, it's shiny. And when it's finished coated, it's going to be shiny. As this dries on the paper, it will turn dull, so it's not going to be representative of what we're going to have. But while it's wet, it is representative. And if we do a two-tone with white, it'll look like this. We'll have white paint next to red, so you can kind of get a sense of that here. If we do two-tone with black or silver, if we did two-tone with silver, you'd see it kind of like that. So we're going to think about it some more, but we're a long ways away from needing a painted tank. We're going to do a lot of fitting. We're going to do all the fitting and initial build up with the tank, not in its finished state in case it gets scratched or dented. We don't want it to get dented, but in case it gets scratched or shows smudges or whatnot, you want to do all that on the old paint. We don't want to mess around with the new paint. So we're a ways away from actually committing to the color. But early on in the process, like we are now, I still want to be thinking about it because the aesthetics in my mind are going to drive some of the decisions that we make. So that's our color. Let me know what you think. You can reach us at milliard.moto@gmail.com, or we're on Facebook or Instagram. But send us a message. Let us know what you think. I think it's going to be a nice color. There are purists out there when it comes to rebuilding a bike who only want to see it stock. And I respect that. This BMW, we don't have all the original parts. It's not going to be a stock BMW. We're going to customize it a bit. There's a market and an interest in that too. So the purists might not like that I'm changing the color, or I'm not going to use a black frame. But we can go a little away from that, I think, and build a custom bike with colors and aesthetics that we like. So I'm going to be back in a moment. We're going to do some actual how-to today. We're going to start taking a look at rebuilding the forks and rebuilding the calipers. So I'll be back in a moment with a clear bench. Okay, we're ready to start work on forks. We're going to take a look at what we want to do with the forks today, and then start taking them apart to see what we need to do. This is one of the forks. There are two that are on the front end. We talked about these on a previous episode. They go into the triple tree. The triples are called on the front of the bike, and there's an axle that runs through here, and it will support the front wheel. They come in two pieces. There's a slider tube and a lower fork tube, and this piece will slide in and out as the suspension works. Hard to move here because there's a spring still inside. But I pulled them off, and we're going to take them apart just to see. I've done a preliminary inspection. They appear to be in good shape. The fork tubes, the lower tubes appear never to have been painted, which is fine. We talked about the aesthetics. I think I'm going to leave these raw aluminum. The upper tubes are steel and chrome steel, and they appear to be straight. This came off of a good used set. There's some scuffing. I think we're going to find that they're serviceable, perfectly serviceable, but they do have a little scuffing. We could replace them, but where we want to have some patina on the bike, showing that it's not a brand new bike, but that it does have some miles on it, some history. Scratches tell a story. And a little bit of history on a piece like this just indicates that the bike is not brand new. It looks good. It's going to look good, but it's not right off the showroom floor. So first thing we're going to do is pull up this rubber boot here. I loosened it a little bit. It's a dust cover. It keeps dust and debris from getting between the seal and the tube here as it works up and down. Now the seal looks to me to be fairly old. I don't know if it's original or not. I have no idea what the history in this bike is. Most likely, since this is from 1983, unless this is a very low mileage bike, these seals have probably been replaced before. I don't see evidence of leaking, but it appears that the tubes are already empty of oil. Normally, these would have oil in them from normal operation. So the next step is to separate this piece, take it out of here, and the lower piece, and that's done by removing this big bolt on the bottom. So we're going to do that, pull the two halves apart, and that will allow us to get to the seal to take that apart. Now first I'm going to take the spring out. This is under tension. I've loosened it somewhat. This is going to pop up a little bit on me, but hopefully not too badly. I'm just going to twist this nut off the top. Yep, there it goes. Okay, so there's the top nut and the washer. We're going to pull the spring out. Lay it on a rag over here, and now the lower tube can move up and down. So it's held in by this big nut down here, this big bolt rather. So we're going to pull the bolts off and take the forks apart. I've got one set up in the vise here already. It's positioned horizontally. It's clamped in with something here to prevent it from being marked by the vise teeth. And the spring is already out. The fork tube moves in and out easily. We're going to use a breaker bar. These bolts are put in pretty tightly. If it's original, they may have been in with a thread sealer, and so that's going to be pretty tight. But we're going to take this off and then take the two pieces apart. So just apply some pressure. Oh, it's not too bad. Actually, we'll rotate that out. This can be difficult because sometimes the piece inside spins. And that may be what's happening here. There we go. Now I see some oil dripping out. There is some oil remaining in this, so I'm going to take this apart. I'm going to lay the silver part, the upper fork tube slider, onto the rag. There we go. As also, you can't quite see it here. We're going to replace this. This is a copper sealing washer because there is oil in the tubes here, and we don't want any leaks when we're all done. So this tube should now come out. I've already released the dust cap. Don't want to hit the other motorcycle in the process. And there it is. We'll clean it up. We'll test it to make sure it's true. No warps in it. But it looks to me like it's a very good set. Going to remove the lower fork tube. Going to set this down in a bucket on the floor because there may be some oil left in it. And then we'll pop these seals out. All right, that's one done. Now we're going to do the same to this one. Clamp it back in the vise. This can be done on the bike, but we don't have a bike yet. We're going to be putting a bike together. It can be done on the bike. You can loosen these lower bolts and take the fork tubes off and replace the seals on the motorcycle itself. But we'll see how this one does. Again, we're going to use the breaker bar. This one is spinning too. But it doesn't feel like it's broken yet. Oh, there we go. Oh, no, it's not. Nope, we got a little issue there. Sometimes that happens. It's not very tight, so we don't need the breaker bar. Nope, this is going to be a little... Well, this happens sometimes. Things don't go quite as we expect. So what I'm going to do is take a little break here and see if I can figure this out, rather than waste your time on the video, and I'll let you know what I did to break this free. Back in a moment. Okay, we're back, and I got it apart. The issue was there's the bolt that goes in the bottom. I told you about that. And as I was spinning the bolt, if you can see this here, the whole piece that the bolt went into was spinning. And so I wasn't able to break it free. That's because there's a cap on the end here, and the cap itself was spinning. So what I had to do was to remove that cap at the end, and it's held on by a circlip like this. It's in the bottom here. The cap sits in here. A lot of shocks don't have a cap on the bottom. This one does. So this cap was in place. The circlip was here. I took the circlip out, and since the cap was already spinning, it actually freed up pretty easily, and the whole piece slid out. Then once the piece slid out, then I was able to, the cap's still on it here, and the bolt's still in. I was able to get a grip on this and break the bolt free. So the trick is to break the bolt free. Once you break those threads, then you can take it out, and it's apart. I took the other one apart just to see how it came apart first, and the circlip went flying across the shop. So now I got to find a circlip, or else I got to buy a new one. It happens sometimes. These things are spring steel, and I had the grip on it, and it let go, and I heard it ting, 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 ting all around the shop. It's somewhere. We'll see if we can find it. Well, the good news is we got it apart. You can see the oil in here is kind of dark. There's no I don't see any evidence of water. If the seals had been leaking badly, we would see some emulsification in here, emulsified oil, oil mixed with water, and that's not the case. So we got that piece out. This piece will now come out just like it did on the other one. I can look in the tube and it looks clean. It's oily, of course, shiny. I don't see any major issues. There is an O-ring in here, which I'm going to have to replace as well. In fact, here it is. Tiny little O-ring. Looks like it's about 1.5 millimeters in cross section. And I don't know how big a diameter it is, but we'll have to replace these. Like I said before, parts are available. Good news about O-rings too is that they are generic, so most of them are. If I can't find a BMW part for this, I can just buy some O-rings that are the same dimensions as this, and they'll work perfectly fine, of course, as long as they're not dissolvable in oil. And most of them, well, some are. If you go to a hardware store and you get like an O-ring for a faucet, that's probably not going to be oil safe. It's for drinking water or whatnot. So we don't do that. We order them, make sure that they're fuel and oil safe, and we can certainly do that. So the forks are apart. We can now work on taking the seals out, and we will do that. I will take a break here in a moment too, freshen up the coffee, and then come back and we'll pop these seals out. Okay, we're back. I've got the fork tubes apart, and now we're going to pop these seals out. There's a seal on the top, and it just prevents that oil from leaking out as the slider tube moves in and out. I got the proper tool for the job. This is a seal remover. Some people will jam a screwdriver in here and try to prop it out. I've done that in the past myself. It's effective. It gets the job done, but it can leave scratches on the inside of this tube. And as you move forward in your skill development, you figure out what the right tool is and you use it. A lot of good information on YouTube, by the way. If you want to find out how to rebuild your forks, you can look at this video, of course, but plenty of others out there, and you learn a lot about tools. So we're going to stick this lower fork tube in the vise, clamp it down, and then we're going to work the tool in. Now what this tool does is it gets underneath the lip of the seal inside the tube, and all we're doing is prying up the seal. We're not jamming a screwdriver down in here to actually bend the seal and then pry it out, because in the process of doing so, like I say, we scratch the aluminum, and we want a good seal. If you have a scratch on aluminum, it'll still work in terms of structural stability and strength, but there could be a gap there where oil can seep by. So we'll stick this in here, pry it up gently, and it comes right out. So there's our used seal. I have no idea how old this is. The rubber flange still got a little bit of flexibility to it. It may have held. I didn't see, like I say, evidence of oil on the tubes, and that's where you're going to see a leaking seal. You're going to see oil on the tubes. I didn't see that, but we're putting the bike together. We want it to be in good shape, so these are inexpensive parts and not terribly difficult to get to, so we're going to replace them. That one's done. I will switch out here and do this one. Hopefully this one will come out easily too. We'll see. I'll clamp it in place on this side so it's not hitting the bench. This is the other fork. It's just a little different in its shape. Stick our tool in here and pry it right up. Comes right up, no trouble. Once again, same color seal. Sometimes these seals are black, and it's possible you could find one is green and one is black, or some other color, which would indicate maybe they were changed at different times. But these two seals, like I say, they're somewhat worn. They're probably still working, but we don't want to be putting a bike together and then after the first 200 or 300 miles, we find out that now we need to replace the fork seals. May as well do it now. So that's it on the forks. When I get the seals, we'll put them back together. In the meantime, I'm going to clean up the parts. I'm going to put these through a parts washer. We're probably going to take off the reflectors here. I've been looking online at different bikes, and this certainly helps for visibility. And that's the thing too about a custom bike. We're going for the look. And a lot of times the reflectors take away from the aesthetic appeal. Now, the reflector is a safety item. So what do we do when we take away a safety item in terms of visibility for style purposes? Well, we have to ride even more defensively than we would otherwise. It's never a good idea to ride along assuming people see you. Hey, I've got reflectors, they must see me. That's not the case. We always want to be defensive when we ride a bike, a motorcycle, or a bicycle too, for that matter. Because as we know, as we drive cars, that sometimes it's hard to see someone on a bicycle or motorcycle. But to remove these reflectors, I think it'll improve the style, and we're just going to have to ride even more carefully. I tend not to do a lot of riding on this kind of a bike at night. I ride during the day. And if I go to a meet, like out in Milford, just a little bit to the west here, there's a very nice motorcycle gathering during the summer on Wednesday evenings. And I'll take it to that. We'll likely ride home, at least heading towards dusk, if not dark. But that's the only time I'm going to ride a custom bike, generally speaking, at night. I'm going for a night ride. I'm going to take a different bike that is not a custom bike. It's stock, and it's more comfortable, and it definitely has more lights. But we're going to sacrifice a reflector in terms of aesthetics in this one. So I'll pry those off. I'll clean the tubes, replace those O-rings, source that part, and I'm going to see if I can find that circlip somewhere in the corner of the shop over there. It bounced off a lot of other stuff, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to find that thing. Or maybe I will someday, but it'll be long after the bike is done. But I could probably find another circlip. So I'll search for that. All right, and then if we still have time, we're going to work on the brake calipers today too. But if not, we'll catch on that next time. But in either event, I'll be back in a moment. Okay, we're back. And before we get into calipers, I found the circlip. That's a minor miracle. Not that any miracle is really a minor one, but there are major minor miracles still happening, I think. And when you find something that bounced around a shop like that, I consider that to be a minor miracle. It actually didn't go as far as I thought it did. It must have bounced back because it was only about 4 feet away from me here. Clear and open on the spot on the floor. So we're good to go with our circlip for the forks. All right, now we're going to take a look at brake calipers. The brake calipers on this bike are Brembo. These are OEM calipers for this motorcycle. The BMWs came with either Brembos or ATEs. I'm not sure why they chose one or the other. I like Brembos a lot. I think they have a lot of power. I prefer the Brembos, a personal opinion. This is not modern technology. It's from the 70s into the 80s, but very, very good brakes. I showed you a Moto Guzzi. The Moto Guzzi we finished a few weeks ago. That one had Brembos also. They're a little bit smaller. That's a lighter bike. Those were known as F05. That's the size of the caliper. This is an F08, a little bit bigger, 32 millimeter piston, which we'll take a look. I believe it's 32, if I remember correctly. Some bikes had F09s that were larger, but F08 is a good size for this bike. Plenty of good stopping power. So this is one caliper. I've taken the other part already, just to kind of review it, but we've got this one. We're going to take this apart today and get it ready for cleaning. First thing we're going to do is pull off this cap. There's a rubber cap or plastic cap on the back, and I can see, as I'm putting my screwdriver here, that someone has been doing this over the years. Again, this is an old caliper, and the fact that there are screwdriver marks there indicate to me that the caliper has been worked on in the past, which certainly it would have been if someone has changed the brake pads ever. You can change the brake pads while the caliper is still on the motorcycle. You pry this cover off and you remove the pins. So inside here we've got the way the pads go in. So we're going to take those off first. Inside there's a spring clip, and different calipers, they're held together different ways. A lot of times what we do is we just start taking it apart carefully and slowly and see what you got, and then work it from there. But this particular caliper has a clip right here in the middle, and it holds these two pins, this pin here and a pin here, holds these two pins in place. These pins go through the caliper halves, and they go through the pads, so they hold the pads in position. And it's a spring clip, so it just holds tension on those pads. So I'm going to pry the clip a little bit out of the way, and then begin to tap this through gently. It's coming through. I'm going to put a pair of pliers on there and gently pull that pin out. There we go. One pin removed. Now that frees up a little piece in here between those two pins. A little support in the middle for this spring. So I'll set that aside, and I want to try to keep in mind how all this goes together so when the time comes we can put it together easily. What I've done in the past, and what you might want to do too if you're doing this for the first time, is document everything you're doing with pictures. Just pull your phone out, take a picture, and you can see then, have a better understanding when the time comes of how it all goes back together. A little tap, the pin is free. Pliers once again to pull that pin out. There's the second pin. These can be replaced, but they'll clean up probably pretty well, and if they clean up well enough, we'll just use them again. So we've got the two pads out, and there's the spring clip. The pads don't look too bad. They actually look pretty decent. A lot of life left in them, but we're not going to reuse the pads. Just like with the forks, if we're going to the trouble of rebuilding these things, we may as well put in some new pads. Pads are probably about $30 a pair. I don't know yet. I don't remember exactly. I'm getting ready to order some new ones, but I don't remember what the price is. They're not terribly expensive, and if you get new ones, then there's no chance that they've yet been contaminated with any grease or oil or anything, and you know that they're completely fresh and will go the distance. We don't want to be, once again, 100 miles, 200 miles into our test ride or into riding a new bike and find out suddenly we need pads. So pads are out, and now we've got just the caliper left. And these calipers are in two halves. So we're going to take these two bolts out here and split the two halves. Oh, that one's already loose. Well, that one is too. All right, so we're going to spin these bolts out. And we're going to end up replacing these. These typically come in a kit. The new bolts do when you buy new seals. You're going to see the seals inside here in a moment. So these two socket head cap screws come out. Set those aside. And the two halves will split. Now we take them apart slowly because we're looking for an O-ring. And there is an O-ring right here. It sits in a little groove, tiny little one. It's probably about a 6 millimeter internal diameter. It may be about 2 millimeter thick at the cross section. It sits between the two halves. This is a 2-piston caliper. That means that there's a piston on each side, and when the caliper squeezes, both sides will squeeze on the disc. Some calipers have only a piston on one side, and it moves the piston on one side only, and it kind of pulls the whole caliper over to the other side. But if you have two pistons and the hydraulic fluid is coming in on one side, on this side of this half of the caliper, it's got to flow, pressure has to flow, and the fluid has to flow from this side into this side. And in order for that to happen without leaking, you have to have a seal in there. And that little O-ring, tiny little O-ring, is the seal. Now this O-ring, we can learn something from looking at O-rings. This one's still flexible. It looks to be pretty round in cross-section. It's been a little bit flattened. The older these O-rings are and the longer they've been in place, the more brittle they're going to be. So this one still has flexibility, and it goes along with the pads that aren't very much worn. It tells me that someone probably rebuilt these calipers not too terribly long ago in terms of miles. Might have been a lot of years, but not too many miles ago, because the pads are still pretty good and the O-ring is still pretty good. But we're going to replace the O-ring. Again, that's going to come in a kit. Next we have the bleed screw. We had the two halves of the caliper. The hydraulic pressure, the brake line connects on one half, and the bleed screw is on the opposite half. And we're going to take that out. This one happens to be a funny size. It's 11 millimeters. 11 millimeters, if you worked with metric things on motorcycles or whatnot, it's a pretty rare size. That's the wrench size. 11 millimeters. You find a lot of 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and so on, but not often on 11. So there's a bleed screw. We're going to replace this too, I believe. It's probably part of the kit. And if not, we'll just get one. They can be cleaned up. And depending on how bad it is, we'll see what we're going to do with it. Next, we have to remove the piston. And first, around the piston is a seal. We're not going to use these seals again. We're just going to pry these off. There's one off. Again, we have seals on here so that the brake fluid doesn't leak. 2 seals. They're dirty. They're definitely caked with some hydraulic fluid. Hydraulic fluid is not the same as oil or anything like that. It's not a petroleum product, but still it's going to have the ability to hold dirt. So we put the seals on so dirt doesn't go in and so fluid doesn't come out. Again, the seals are flexible, surprisingly flexible. They didn't tear. A lot of times you're going to see dry rot in these seals and they're going to just fall apart. These seals look to be in good shape. Again, we're going to replace them, but it tells us that the caliper isn't bad. Now the piston is in the caliper half here, and that's in there pretty tightly. I can tell just by looking at it. We don't want to put a wrench on this or a screwdriver or anything on here necessarily. We're going to try to get this out with air pressure. So what I'm going to do is take a little break here, fire up the air compressor. It's going to make too much noise if we're taping at the same time. I'll get some pressure in the tank, and then we'll see if we can, I'll come back in a moment, we'll see if we can get these pistons out with air pressure. We have to be careful with that because they are going to move. And we talked about the circlip flying around. It just flew around because it was springy. I've seen too much pressure go into a piston, and the piston takes off, not like a spring, but like a shot. I mean, it really goes. So we don't want to break any windows or hurt anybody, hurt ourselves. So we'll see if we can free those up gently with some air pressure. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I put the caliper halves back together with the O-ring in place because I want to pressurize the brake caliper to get these pistons to move. I mentioned that we're doing it with air pressure, and I expect them to move. We're going to put safety glasses on in this case. Probably should wear them all the time. But we're putting them on in this case just to make sure that there's no issues with too much pressure or getting injured. So we got some pressure in the tank here. I'm going to try to get these pistons to move a little bit. Yep, there they go. You heard the pop. One piston came free. Going to be a little harder to get the other one to move. I'll take the caliper apart again to make that happen, but we can do that. Spin the, you can see there's fluid leaking out here. This can be a messy job because there is fluid remaining in these calipers. Just spin these bolts out again, separate the 2 halves. So one piston came out before the other. That indicates that one was just dragging a little bit in comparison to the other. Let's take a look at the halve here. It's messy in there. Brake fluid is typically clear, nearly clear, and it's anything but clear right now. There's a rubber seal in here, and what can happen with time is that the seals can deteriorate in the brake fluid, and that's what would turn it black. So this is black. It's kind of muddy in there. It's a mess, but that's okay. It's fixable, cleanable. We'll take care of that. Just took the O-ring out of there again. Now we're going to see if we can pop this one out real quick. Put my safety glasses back on and see if we can free this one. Now, in order to free this one, I have to cover up this hole. I may cover up this way, and just to see if we can get it to, actually I'll do it like this. We don't want it to go flying. We just want to give it a little pressure. There we go. A little bit of pressure and popped right out. There's our second piston. So the pistons were not frozen in the caliper. That's a good sign. Preliminary and look at them here. We're probably going to see that they're not pitted. really in pretty good shape. We can replace the pistons if we need to. The nice thing about, again, these Brembo brakes is that they're serviceable, and we can buy the parts if we need to, but these pistons look to be in excellent condition. We'll get all the fluid off them, clean them up, and then get ready to put them back together. We don't have the new pads or the caliper rebuild kits in yet, but we'll get those soon. And when they come in, we'll take a look at them, and just like with the forks, we'll get all these parts cleaned, and then we'll reassemble them on a new episode. So I hope you're enjoying the show. If you like the show, please click the like button and subscribe. And again, you can reach us at milliard.moto@gmail.com. Any questions or concerns or ideas, we'd be happy to help you understand how your calipers go together, your forks for that matter too. So thanks for tuning in. If you're watching on Channel 96 here in Nashua, a special thanks to you for tuning in and supporting the channel. And if you're watching on YouTube, welcome as well. Thank you, and we will see you next time.